Hello everyone, I'm Ando, and today I'd like you to have a journey with me through the writing process, the creativity, and the ideas behind my last project, Trying Is Really Hard. The Simple Song was the first song that I wrote on the record, and it's quite literally what the name suggests. It was a simple song. It was a 3-chord song with a minor kind of extended lick at the end. It was an A minor, a G, and a C through the whole song, where I would hammer on a lot of the parts of the song. This wasn't really an in-depth technical song to write. I wrote it the same day that I created my YouTube channel, I think. I was like 11 months ago, and that's when I first got the idea for this whole record, having a song come out each month with this whole album. And you know, I think it was a great point for where I was starting in my actual writing process. Something of a simple idea, but then branching it off. So it was, you know, one of my more favorites that I like to come back to from time to time. Raspberry was one of those songs that kind of came off of the cut. It was quite a late one in terms of the writing process for that song. It was at the end of the month when the song was due. It was the day after, I believe, is when I wrote that song. During a lot of these earlier songs, I would take samples and pieces off of GarageBand. I remember I took small clips of them and I'd mash them together into the song. And Raspberry was my first kind of experimental idea of this. So I had taken the small clips from GarageBand and then mixed it in with the song prior. I didn't think this song was particularly anything special. I think it was more of an experiment more than anything. But the kind of 80s style, kind of 90s riff, kind of rock thing that I had going on was kind of interesting at the time. And nowadays I don't seem to really look back much on the song now as what I would like to. But, you know, I think with this entire record, you know, the progression from going from something that wasn't really as, you know, interesting or as thought-provoking as, you know, Simple Song was, until all the way until the last track of the record, I think everything slowly begins to build up and you slowly begin to see, you know, how it progressed throughout. But yeah, Raspberry was one of those songs I wasn't really too overly keen about in general. So Forest Rain was one of those songs where it was in that early development stage of the record, and I was still trying to figure it out with the tonality and everything. And a common thing that you'll see in all my songs and anything on future records or future projects is I do always like to add a tad bit of reverb to most of everything. So it's a really common occurrence within most of this album. However, I will say that when I was writing this song, I couldn't really remember a whole lot of it, but there was, you know, a stage in the writing process where I was like mixing in with the chords, and I had the pre-demo done for the song. So the demo was already done and that was already over. I remember I played it for someone. It was for my sister at the time. And I told her to just give me a name for it. And she said Forest Rain. And I ended up keeping that name for the final draft of the song. So it's one of those songs that kind of relates to, you know, that specific memory of me at the time. Again, I think Forest Rain was one of those songs where I had written it also at the dead end of the month. It was nothing too, you know, retrospective or nothing, but it really showed some, you know, new detail into some of my future works. It showed some of the precursor and ideas that I had going for the next song after. Because for each song off of this record, they kind of build and gain this kind of snowball effect, and later on you see much more tracks that are much more dynamic and in depth with each other, while others aren't as much and they feel a little bit empty and vague. When I was writing this one, it was a little bit more emptier than what I thought. You know, going back and listening to these songs sometimes, you sometimes do find the imperfections that are in them, but also I think that just hides the kind of the growth futurely that I had when I was writing these later songs. But I think even all these earlier songs, even if they weren't some of my best that I played, I still like greatly appreciate them and the part that I played and having like a further development. So I still really appreciate the song in general, and I still enjoy it. So Hardwired is one of those songs that I really remember on It's actually funny because the first part of the song I had actually written instantly. It was right after we had finished Forest Rain, is when I started writing Hardwired. And I was looking at it, and I had written the intro and everything was done. And before I had posted the song, I had done this small snippet clip of it, and I was like, I'll come back to it and edit it later. That never happened. I came back and I thought, you know what, this is good as it is, There was actually an extended version. It's quite a short song. It was about, I think, a minute and a half, like a minute and 35 seconds. But I came back to it, and there's an extended version out there. I don't know if I'll ever release it, but there's an extended version of the song where I think it goes for about 2 minutes or so. And I decided to leave it out of the cut for the record, but there were future versions that I had planned. But for some reason, I decided to stick with this one. I did, with the audience and whatnot, there was definitely a little bit more hype for this particular song later on the record when I released the pre-teaser for it, so I was quite happy about it. There's not much to say about the inspiration really behind it. I remember I was just sitting in my room and I was messing around and I came up with the pre-opening riff for the song. And I didn't realize how much, certain people had liked it, when I played for them. They were like, oh yeah, that wasn't a bad riff and whatnot. So I kind of stuck with that and then had a later idea to push something. But no, I was really happy and quite surprised with the song. It was, it's nice to look back at stuff that I haven't really, remembered, or the journey that it took me to think about it. So I always appreciate Hardwired for that. So Not Yet was one of my direct favorites off of the whole record. I had thought, okay, well, this one's going to be the first one that I write my music video about. And the music video was, we drove out and whatnot to the beach and we had decided to record it based off of that. And the whole progression of that story was, for that particular song, was, there's this guy, and, he's trying to get into contact with someone, but, he never could. And so he'd be so, frustrated picking up the phone all the time trying to get somewhere, but he never could. So as he sat there burning throughout his time waiting for someone to come, they end up never coming. And this was one of my more favorites on the record because there was a lot of more creative time and creative process put into this one. I had kind of fleshed out much more of a story, and I think it fleshed out the song more. It kind of gave a much larger rhythm to the song, which I was really happy about. And the guitar riffs too on top of that. I was really happy with that specific song. But I'll always think of that song always correlating with the video that day. We shot that whole video in one whole day for absolutely free. We never paid for anything in the video. And it was, an absolute blast, record with everyone else there who was, recording it with me. We had, on that same day, after we had finished, the recordings, I had edited it the exact same day. It was filmed, whatnot. And then I showed it for everyone else, and everyone was really happy with it, and then, we ended up putting it up and everything. But yeah, it's always one of those songs that I come back to, and I kind of said the same thing, about Hardwired also, but, you tend to forget a little bit, as you do with, majority artists, where you give more time and focus onto your newer songs, but you kind of sometimes forget your older songs, especially when, they're not as well known, so you always think of, okay, what's the next project going to be? But for this one, I always like to come back to it, the process and all of the riffs coming from this song originally always come and originate from the studio, which is just in my bedroom. That's where everything's always kind of been recorded, so everything's been written on this record inside of my bedroom. I don't think there was anything written outside. I don't think so. Maybe there was, but that's essentially where I write everything. So with this particular song, it will always be a pure favorite of mine because of the process that we had behind it, and also the memories that kind of correlate with it. This song and its name kind of came from people's different reactions to the songs. I would get my family most of the time to listen to the pre-demos of these songs, and then I'd get them to help me adjust with my songs. And this one had come on, and it received quite a lot of good feedback from them, and I needed to find a name for it. And the name from this song just kind of came from the word amaze, but I didn't want to put Amazed as the name for the song. I thought it would be a little bit lackluster, a little bit, weird. So I decided to run it through different languages, and I found it in French, and that would come from the name Emavel. If anyone's French and they're listening to this, I'm sorry for the wrong pronunciation of the word. You can correct me later if you want for how the word should be said. I thought it was really cool. So I know I really liked the word, and I thought it really fitted really well. Coming off of Not Yet, I wrote Mr. A. I think I wrote that right after Not Yet had finished, and a couple days after I'd slowly filled in the rest of the song, which typically isn't common for me in my writing process. Typically, if I'm sticking to it, it's done within the first 3 days. This song took me a little over 2 weeks to write. This song definitely had a high consistency that I like to put in a lot of strings, a lot of basses, synths into this song, and this one was quite enjoyable. The concept and the principles behind this one were mainly just the theme of Halloween in general. It really came to me as much more as a spookier kind of song, something a little bit more scary, something a little more thrilling, and I think I kind of got the idea that I wanted to out of it. I'm glad about it. And yeah, it was just a really fun song to work on throughout the whole process of writing it. See You Someday was a song that I was, really happy with. I'd written the whole song on the idea of mirroring, so I had this trumpet fit in with the song. And it did a certain pattern, and I wanted it to match the guitar. So throughout the song, I had this trumpet playing in the, verses, and I take the guitar, and they would match each other, and that was the kind of whole premise around this song. And also just any kind of external patterns that I could find off of GarageBand, I always liked to include with my songs to kind of match them really well, and I think this one worked out really well. There was a end part in the song that I had written and I had put down for the trumpet that I was really happy with. It took me 20 or so takes to get right on the program. And then I got it and I was like, yes, we finally got this right. And then it was mapping it the same on guitar to make it lead and make it sound really well and really consistent with it. And, one of those songs that, I'll always look back and I'll always be kind of quite happy about, this one. Waiting for You was one of those songs that I had written with the intent of having a small section part kind of pull off the melody, and we had this lead section that would come in where it'd be much more grainier, much more rockier kind of sounding feeling that would drive the whole song. And to me, every single time I think of this song, I think of more cruising along the beach and looking at, everything go by. Really, when I think of that song, that's kind of what I think of for this. And, the tonality, kind of follows the same consistency with what I did for the most of the album. For most of the time, it was either a clean tone or a really, slightly heavy reverb, sometimes a little bit grainy, and I think this song kind of implemented all that I kind of did previously within the record. And as I was releasing each song, each individual month, I had put in that this song would kind of mix in with everything else, and this one had colors and textures that I had added with everything else. And it's just another one of those more relaxing kind of funner songs, especially because everything that I was writing at the time for all future projects and then was a more kind of monotoned or slightly upbeat, happier kind of sound. And so this song kind of incorporated that, and I was really quite happy with it. So The Calm and the Storm, I really enjoyed this song. This was my favorite song to record on the record. It was just one of my favorites overall. I actually, for this song in the record, I had added in vocals. Not really vocals of me singing, just me speaking in there. I thought, for a tonality change or a little bit of a texture difference within the record, I would add me actually talking in the song, or some form of that. And I remember I was looking through the Bible and I pulled out a quote that Jesus said on the Sermon of the Mount, where he said that we as people were the light of the world. And I thought that was a really, wonderful and inspirational quote. So I put that in there. And this kind of whole song was wrapped around the idea of, someone, walking throughout the rain and, through those kind of like alleyways, or that darker, monotoned kind of song. So this is the video. Thank you all for watching. And I hope you enjoyed me rambling for about a little bit over 10 minutes or something, talking about these songs and kind of my ideas behind them, and why I enjoyed writing them, why I didn't sometimes enjoy writing others, or what ideas I had with them. Let me know if you like this kind of style of content so I can keep making more of it, or that would be pretty cool. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll see you all later.